Welcome to my channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. Have you ever lived in a house that felt wrong? Not haunted exactly, but like it was keeping secrets from you? I moved into 1247 Maple Street in Burlington, Vermont last October. Beautiful Victorian home, original hardwood floors, crown molding, and a basement door that opens by itself every single night at 3:17 a.m. The realtor never mentioned that part. What would you do if you discovered your new home had its own schedule? Would you investigate, or would you do what I did for the first week and pretend it wasn't happening? Because let me tell you something. Some doors are meant to stay closed, and some secrets, well, they're buried in basements for a reason. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what really happened in that house, and why I'll never, ever, ignore a door that opens by itself again. The story begins now. The moving truck pulled away just as the autumn sun dipped behind the Vermont mountains. October in New England. There's nothing quite like it. The air smells like wood smoke and dying leaves. Everything feels cozy and mysterious at the same time. I stood in my new living room, surrounded by boxes, feeling that particular mix of exhaustion and excitement that comes with starting over. After my divorce, after losing my job at the marketing firm in Boston, this house felt like a fresh start. The price had been suspiciously low for such a beautiful property, but the inspector said everything checked out. Solid foundation, good bones, just needed some love. That first night I barely unpacked anything. Just my bed, some clothes, basic kitchen stuff. I collapsed into bed around 11, dead tired from the move. The house made those settling sounds old houses make, creaks and sighs as the temperature dropped. Comforting, really, like the house was getting comfortable too. Then I heard it, a soft click, followed by the unmistakable groan of hinges. I sat up, heart suddenly pounding. Living alone makes you hyper-aware of sounds. Every noise could be an intruder. I grabbed my phone, using its flashlight as I crept down the hallway. The house was still. Shadows danced on the walls from the streetlight outside. The basement door stood wide open. I definitely remembered closing it. The realtor had shown me the basement earlier, unfinished but dry. Just concrete walls and exposed beams. Perfect for storage. I'd closed that door. Locked it even, because the old-fashioned skeleton key had been sitting right there in the lock. But now, open. The darkness beyond looked thick, impenetrable. Like black velvet. "Hello?" My voice cracked. God, I felt ridiculous. Calling out like some horror movie victim. Nothing. I flicked the light switch. The single bulb at the top of the stairs flickered on, casting harsh shadows down the wooden steps. Everything looked normal. Just a basement. I started down the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. No, wait. What was I doing? I'd seen enough movies to know better. I backed up, shut the door firmly, and turned the key. The lock clicked solidly into place. Must have been the house settling. Old houses do weird things. The door probably wasn't hung right. I'd add it to my list of fixes. I went back to bed, but sleep came slowly. And when it did, I dreamed of darkness, thick, breathing darkness that pressed against doors, looking for a way in. The next morning, I woke to sunshine streaming through the windows. The house looked beautiful in daylight, warm, inviting. I laughed at myself for being so jumpy. First night in a new place, of course I'd been on edge. I made coffee, started unpacking the kitchen. Around noon, I remembered the basement door and went to check. Still locked, see? Just my imagination. That night, I made sure to lock it before bed. turned the key twice, even gave the handle a good tug to make sure. Solid. At 3:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of that door opening. This time, I looked at my phone as I lay there, frozen. 3:17 exactly. The groan of hinges seemed louder in the darkness. Longer, like the door was opening slowly, deliberately. I didn't get up, told myself it was the wind. Old houses have drafts, temperature changes, completely normal. I pulled the covers over my head like a child and waited for morning. But I knew. I knew that door was open. Sure enough, when I finally got up at 7, there it stood, wide open. The skeleton key still in the lock, turned to the open position. This continued for 5 more nights. Every night, I'd lock the door. Every night at 3:17 a.m., I'd hear it open. By the 7th night, I'd stopped checking. What was the point? It would be open. It was always open. I started sleeping with earplugs, but the earplugs didn't stop the dreams. Every night now, I dreamed of that basement. Sometimes I was standing at the top of the stairs, looking down into impossible darkness. Sometimes I was already at the bottom, feeling my way along cold concrete walls that went on forever. And sometimes I wasn't alone down there. I could hear breathing that wasn't mine. Slow, patient, like something that had all the time in the world. I started avoiding that hallway during the day, taking the long way around through the dining room to get to the kitchen. Stupid, but that door, even closed and locked, it felt wrong, like it was watching me, waiting. You can only ignore something for so long. By the 2nd week, the earplugs weren't enough, because it wasn't just the sound keeping me awake, it was the knowing. Knowing that door was open. Knowing that darkness was spilling into my hallway. I tried everything rational first. Called a locksmith. Big guy named Dave, been in the business 30 years. He examined the door, the frame, the lock. Nothing wrong with it, he said, testing the mechanism. Solid as they come, these old locks, they're actually harder to pick than modern ones. But it keeps opening by itself. He gave me that look, the one that says crazy city person who doesn't understand old houses. Humidity changes, he said. Wood swells and contracts. Sometimes doors pop open. You could try a deadbolt. But I knew a deadbolt wouldn't help. Whatever was opening that door was turning the key. I tried other things, stupid things. Put a chair against the door, found it moved aside in the morning, placed neatly against the wall. Tried tying string from the door handle to the banister. Found it untied, coiled perfectly on the floor. Even sprinkled flour on the floor to catch footprints. In the morning, the flour was undisturbed, except for a single line through it, like something had dragged itself across without using feet. Next, I set up my laptop to record. Positioned it in the hallway with a clear view of the door. Started recording before bed, locked the door, went to sleep. At 3:17 a.m., I heard it open. The next morning, I reviewed the footage with my coffee, expecting to finally have answers. What I saw made my hands shake so badly I spilled coffee all over my kitchen table. At 3:16 a.m., the hallway was still. At 3:17 a.m. exactly, the skeleton key began to turn. Slowly, deliberately, like invisible fingers were gripping it. The lock clicked. The door swung open into perfect darkness. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what happened at 3:18 a.m. The darkness in the doorway moved. Not like shadows move when light changes, this was different. The darkness seemed to breathe, to pulse, like it was tasting the air of my hallway. Then, at 3:47 a.m., the door closed. The key turned, click. I must have watched that video 20 times. Showed it to my friend Sarah when she visited from Boston. That's edited, right? She asked. I wished it was. she stayed the night, determined to see for herself. We sat in the hallway with flashlights watching the door. At 3:16, we tensed. At 3:17, click. The key turned, the door opened. Sarah's flashlight beam cut into the darkness beyond. Nothing, just stairs leading down. But the darkness seemed thicker than it should be, like our lights couldn't quite penetrate it properly. "Maybe there's someone living down there," she whispered. "A squatter, or—" "Every night at exactly 3:17, I whispered back. "And how do they lock it from the inside when the only key is up here?" We sat there for 30 minutes, neither of us willing to go down those stairs. The air from the basement was cold, too cold for October. And that smell, that sweet, organic smell I'd noticed before. Stronger now. Sarah covered her nose. "What is that?" she asked. I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because I'd started noticing something else. The darkness at the bottom of the stairs, it wasn't uniform. It had depth, texture, like looking into deep water at night. Finally, at 3:47, the door swung shut. The key turned. Sarah left the next morning. Early, made excuses about needing to get back for work, but I saw the way she looked at that door. She felt it too, the wrongness. "Maybe you should stay at my place for a while," she suggested as she loaded her car. "Just until you figure this out." But I couldn't leave. Not yet. I needed to understand. This was my house, my fresh start. I wasn't going to be driven out by a door. That night, alone again, I did something stupid. Or brave. Depends on how you look at it. I went down. At 3:10 a.m., I positioned myself at the top of the basement stairs. Inside. In the dark. I'd closed the door behind me, leaving the key in the hallway lock. My plan was simple. Wait inside, see what happened when the door opened. See if something came out or went in. The basement smelled different at night. During the day, it was just musty concrete and old wood. But now, there was something else. Sweet. Organic. Like overripe fruit left in the sun too long. I sat on the top step, flashlight off to save battery, phone in my hand. 3:15. My heart hammered so loud I was sure it would give me away. To what, I didn't know. 3:16. The darkness pressed against my eyes. That complete darkness you only get in windowless spaces. I could hear my own breathing, too fast, too shallow. And underneath it, was that my imagination, or was there another sound, a whisper of air, like something else breathing? Waiting. 3:17. The lock clicked above me. The door swung open and hallway light spilled onto the stairs, but I wasn't looking at that. I was looking at what was happening in the basement. The darkness was moving, shifting, like something massive was unfolding itself from the concrete floor. My flashlight beam shook as I clicked it on, sweeping across the basement. Empty. Completely empty. Except, the floor wasn't right. Where solid concrete should have been, there was a hole. Rough edges, like something had pushed up from below. The sweet smell was stronger here, and from deep in that hole came a sound. Breathing. Slow. Deep. Patient. I scrambled backwards up the stairs, through the door, slammed it shut. My hands shook so badly I could barely turn the key. But I locked it. Locked it and ran to my bedroom, where I sat against the wall until dawn, clutching a kitchen knife I knew would be useless. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. By the third day, exhaustion was making me see things. Shadows moving in my peripheral vision. Dark shapes in mirrors that vanished when I looked directly at them. The sweet smell from the basement had spread through the house. Faint, but always there, like something rotting in the walls. I started researching online, searching for anything about 1247 Maple Street. Found an old forum post from 2010. Someone asking about the house with the door that opens. The responses were vague. warnings. People who'd lived there or knew someone who had. All saying the same thing. Don't go in the basement. Don't look for answers. Just leave. But one comment stood out, from a user named dparkuvm. It's not a basement. Check the geological surveys. That hole goes deeper than it should. The username, David Park. The geology student who'd disappeared in 1978. I needed answers, real answers. The next day, I called the previous owner, tracked her down through property records. Mrs. Chen, elderly woman who'd lived there 40 years before moving to assisted living. "Oh, you bought the Maple Street house," she said when I explained who I was. Her voice went flat. "How are you sleeping?" "Not well. There's something wrong with the basement door." A long pause, then, "It opens at 3:17. My blood went cold. "You know about it?" "Everyone who's lived there knows about it. My husband tried to seal it once. Concrete blocks. The door still opened. The blocks were moved, pushed aside like they were made of paper." "What's down there?" Another pause. Longer. "I don't know," she finally said. "And I lived there 40 years without finding out. You want my advice? Don't look. Don't investigate. Just let it open. Let it close. It's been doing it longer than that house has stood." "What do you mean?" "The Historical Society has records. Every house built on that spot, going back to the 1700s, they all had basements, and they all had doors that opened at 3:17. That's impossible, is it?" Her voice was tired. "You've seen it open. You've looked into that darkness. Does anything about it feel possible?" I wanted to argue, but couldn't. She was right. Nothing about this was possible. But it was happening. "My husband went down once," she continued, "middle of the night, just like you. Came back up white as a sheet. Wouldn't tell me what he saw, but he never went near that door again. And for the next week, things were different." "Different how?" "The door started opening earlier. 3:16, then 3:15, like something was eager, impatient. We started finding things moved in the house. Small things. A book, a shoe. Always closer to the basement door. Like they were being collected." My mouth went dry. "What did you do?" "We left for a week, stayed in a hotel. When we came back, everything was normal again. 3:17, just like always. But we never found the things that went missing. And my husband, he never went into the basement again, not even during the day." "Did he ever tell you what he saw?" "Once, years later, when he was dying." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "He said there were teeth, rows and rows of teeth, and the hole, it wasn't a hole, it was a mouth." I thanked her and hung up, but I couldn't leave it at that. I spent the day at the Burlington Historical Society, searching through old records, property deeds, newspaper archives, looking for any mention of 1247 Maple Street. What I found made me wish I'd listened to Mrs. Chen. The Burlington Historical Society was a treasure trove of disturbing information. The elderly volunteer, Margaret, seemed unsurprised when I mentioned my address. "Another one," she muttered, pulling out a thick folder labeled Maple Street Incidents. "Another one? You're the 5th person to come asking about that property in the past decade. They never stay long." The records went back to 1743. The first house built on that spot belonged to a merchant named Josiah Hartwell. His diary, preserved in climate-controlled storage, made for chilling reading. October 15th, 1743. The cellar door opens of its own accord each night at the devil's hour. Martha believes it to be spirits, but I fear something worse. There is a breathing in the darkness below, a patient sound, as if the earth itself were alive. October 22nd, 1743. I have seen it. God help me. I have seen what lies beneath. It is older than this land, older than memory. It waits below, as it has always waited. The natives knew. They built no dwellings here. They knew what slept beneath. October 30th, 1743. The door opens earlier now. 3:15, then 3:10. It knows I have seen it. It hungers. I hear whispers in the walls, names, so many names, all those who have fed it through the years. Tomorrow I will seal the cellar. If this journal is found, and I am not, know that I tried. The thing below must not be allowed to rise. Hartwell disappeared in 1751. His wife found the basement door open one morning, and Josiah was simply gone. No body, no trace. Just his shoes at the top of the stairs. The pattern repeated through history. Different houses. The original burned in 1832, rebuilt in 1833. That one was torn down in 1891, replaced by my Victorian. But always, there were reports of the basement door and disappearances. 1773, Catherine Hartwell, Josiah's daughter-in-law, gone. 1828, 2 children from the Morrison family, gone. 1849, a traveling salesman staying at what was then a boarding house, gone. 1903, the entire Fitzgerald family, 4 people, gone. 1924, a prohibition agent investigating the basement for bootlegging, gone. 1941, 3 soldiers billeted in the house during training, gone. 67, a hippie commune tried to live there. 5 people, all gone in one night. Always the same. The door found open. Personal belongings left behind. No bodies, no explanation. Margaret showed me newspaper clippings. Each time the disappearances were explained away. People assumed to have run off. Mental breakdowns, family troubles, but the pattern was clear if you looked. The city tried to demolish the house in 1973, Margaret said, adjusting her glasses. The wrecking ball broke 3 times. The operator said it was like hitting solid rock, even though it was just wood and plaster. They gave up, sold it instead. The most recent disappearance was in 1978. A geology student from UVM named David Park had been renting a room. His landlord found his clothes folded neatly at the top of the basement stairs. David was never seen again, but it was his research I found most interesting. Before he vanished, David had been investigating unusual geological formations in the area. His notes, donated to the Historical Society by his family, included ground-penetrating radar images of the land beneath Maple Street, the hole I'd seen in my basement. According to David's research, it went down, and down, and down. Far deeper than should be possible given the water table in the area. The readings showed a cavity extending at least 300 feet straight down, then branching out in all directions like roots or veins, and it wasn't natural. The edges showed tool marks, ancient ones, pre-Columbian, maybe older. His final note, dated 3 days before his disappearance, simply read, "It's not a basement, it's a throat, and I think it's swallowing." There was one more document, a letter from 1923, written by a Professor Edmund Blackwood from Harvard's Department of Anthropology. He'd been studying native legends in the area. The Abenaki people have no name for it. They simply call it the hunger below. Their stories speak of something that fell from the stars in the time before memory, something that burrowed deep and slept, but it does not sleep peacefully. Every night it tests its bonds. Every night it calls for food. The indigenous people learn to appease it. Small offerings, animals. But when the Europeans came, they built upon the forbidden ground, and the hunger grew. Now it takes people. Now it feeds on something more than flesh. I have seen the petroglyphs they tried to hide, the warnings carved in stone. Do not wake it, do not feed it, do not look upon it, for those who see it are marked, and the marked always return to the mouth. I left the Historical Society as the sun was setting, my mind reeling, drove home on autopilot, trying to process what I'd learned. The house sat quietly on Maple Street, looking perfectly normal, just another Victorian among many. But I knew better now. That night, I packed a bag. I was done. Whatever was in that basement, whatever had been feeding for centuries, I wasn't going to be its next meal. I'd leave in the morning, find a hotel, put the house back on the market. But first, I had to see it one more time. I had to know if what Mrs. Chen's husband saw was real, if what Josiah Hartwell described was true. Just one look, from the top of the stairs, then I'd leave forever. At 3:16, I stood at the basement door, hand on the key. My bag was by the front door, my car keys in my pocket. Just one look. 3:17. I turned the key, opened the door. The basement was different. The hole was bigger, much bigger, taking up most of the floor now, and from deep within came a soft pink light, pulsing like a heartbeat. I shined my flashlight down. The beam seemed to get swallowed by the hole, but I could see something, wet, organic, moving. And then I saw them, teeth, rows and rows of human teeth, spiraling down into the darkness. Thousands of them, millions, all perfectly preserved, all slightly moving as if tasting the air. Between the teeth I saw other things, bones, clothes, watches, glasses, shoes, all the remnants of all the people who'd gone missing. They were part of it now, part of the walls of that terrible throat. And at the very edge of my flashlight beam, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Eyes, human eyes, dozens of them, still moving, still watching, still aware. The breathing sound grew louder, eager. The hole widened slightly, and I realized with sick certainty that it could swallow the entire house if it wanted. It was choosing to wait, choosing to feed slowly, savoring each meal across the centuries. I stumbled backward, and that's when I heard the whispers. Hundreds of voices, all the people who'd been taken, all still somehow alive down there, still conscious, still part of it. They were saying names, over and over, names of people who'd lived in the house, names of people who'd looked into the hole, and then I heard it, clear as day. My name. They were saying my name. I ran, slammed the door, grabbed my bag, fled to my car, drove through the night, putting as much distance between me and that house as possible. Didn't stop until I reached Ohio. Didn't feel safe until I was in California. I live in San Diego now, as far from Vermont as I could get. Found a job, a new apartment, a new life. But some nights, I wake up at 3:17 a.m. Even here, 3,000 miles away, I wake up at exactly 3:17. And I wonder, what if it's not the house that's marked? What if it's the people who've lived there, who've seen it? Mrs. Chen's husband saw it. He died in his sleep. The newspaper said natural causes. But what if when the marked die, that's when it finally feeds? What if death is just another kind of door, another kind of mouth? I've started noticing things. Small things, objects moving in my apartment. Always closer to my bedroom door. The sweet smell sometimes, late at night. And last week I found a tooth on my pillow, not mine. Old, yellowed, human. They say you can't run from your problems. But I'm going to keep trying. Because the alternative is accepting that some doors, once opened, can never really be closed, and that some hungers can follow you anywhere. Last night, I woke to find my bedroom door open, just a crack, and through that crack, I swear I could see stars, but not normal stars. These were wrong, too close, too hungry. I'm uploading this story everywhere I can, Facebook, Reddit, YouTube. If something happens to me, if I disappear, check the basement of wherever I was living. Check for teeth, check for eyes. And whatever you do, don't look too long, because once you see it, once you really see it, it sees you too, and it never, ever forgets. The door opens at 3:17. Every night, in every house I live in now. It's just a crack, just enough to let the darkness in, just enough to remind me that I belong to it, that we all belong to it in the end. Sweet dreams, everyone, and remember, if your door opens by itself at night, maybe just let it. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, some depths are better left unplumbed, because once you know what's down there, once you've seen it, you become part of its collection, part of its patience, part of its terrible, endless hunger. I can hear it calling my name. Even now, even here, 3:17 is coming. Did this story keep you up? Are you checking your doors right now? I need to know I'm not alone in this. Comment below if you've ever experienced something in your house you couldn't explain. Like and subscribe if you want to hear more true stories about places that shouldn't exist, and the things that hunger in the dark. And remember, 3:17 comes every night. What's opening doors in your house? Story number 2. Picture this. You're driving alone on a stretch of highway so empty you haven't seen another car for the past hour. The radio's been cutting in and out with static for miles now. And then, you see him, a figure on the side of the road, thumb out, waiting. But here's the thing that'll make your skin crawl. He's not looking at the road, he's looking directly at you, like he's been waiting, specifically for you. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. What's the one thing you've never told anyone? That secret you keep locked so deep you sometimes forget it's there? Well, what if I told you there's someone out there who already knows? The story begins now. I've driven Interstate 70 through Kansas more times than I can count. Sales territory stretches from Denver to Kansas City, and that stretch through western Kansas, it's like driving through a void. Nothing but wheat fields and wind for hundreds of miles. It was October, late October. The kind of night where the darkness seems thicker somehow. I'd left Denver around 3 in the afternoon, hoping to make it to Hayes before stopping. But a client meeting ran long, and by the time I hit the really empty stretch past Lyman, it was already past 11. I was somewhere between Cheyenne Wells and Kit Carson when I saw him. Just standing there, on the shoulder, in the middle of absolutely nowhere. My first thought was, car trouble. Had to be. Nobody hitchhikes anymore, not out here, but there was no broken down car, no hazard lights, just this guy, standing perfectly still, thumb out, wearing what looked like an old army jacket, and he was staring right at me, not at the road, at me, through my windshield, like he could see me coming from miles away. I should have kept driving. Every instinct said, keep driving. But guilt's a funny thing. What if his phone was dead? What if he'd been standing there for hours? My foot eased off the gas, the speedometer dropped from 75 to 60, then 50. Don't be stupid, Marcus, I said out loud. That's something I do on long drives, talk to myself. You don't pick up hitchhikers. But my foot kept easing off that pedal. 40 miles per hour now, I could see him more clearly, middle-aged, clean-shaven. That army jacket was olive green, Vietnam era. He had a small backpack at his feet. He wasn't moving, wasn't waving, just standing there, thumb out, watching me slow down like he knew I would. I pulled over. The gravel crunched under my tires as I stopped about 20 feet past him. I looked in my rearview mirror. He was already walking toward my car. Not rushing, just walking, like he had all the time in the world. He opened the passenger door and the dome light came on. That's when I saw his eyes for the first time. They were normal, just brown eyes. But there was something about the way he looked at me, like he was reading something written on my face. "Thanks for stopping," he said. His voice was quiet, soft almost. "Been waiting a while." "Yeah, no problem," I heard myself say. "Where you headed?" He settled into the seat, placing his backpack between his feet. "East, same as you, Marcus." I froze. My hand was on the gear shift, about to put the car back in drive, and I just froze. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" He was buckling his seatbelt, taking his time. I said, "I'm heading east, same as you." "No, you said my name." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and there was this moment, this split second, where I could have sworn his eyes weren't brown anymore. They were black, completely black. Then I blinked, and they were brown again. "Did I?" He smiled, just a little. "Sorry. Long day. Mind if we get moving?" Every alarm bell in my head was going off, but instead, I put the car in drive, pulled back onto the highway. We drove in silence for maybe 5 minutes. 5 minutes where I kept glancing at him out of the corner of my eye. He was just sitting there, hands folded in his lap, looking straight ahead. Then he spoke again. "You know, Marcus, everybody's got secrets." My throat went dry. "Excuse me?" "Secrets. Things we keep hidden, even from ourselves sometimes." He shifted slightly, turning to look at me. "Take you, for example. I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." His voice was still soft, almost hypnotic. "Denver office, regional sales manager. Married to Janet for, what is it now, 15 years? Beautiful house in Highlands Ranch, 2 kids, Sarah's 13, Tommy's 10. The car swerved slightly. I corrected quickly, but my hands were shaking. Who are you?" "Just a guy who needs a ride." He turned back to face the windshield. "But you're not just a sales manager, are you, Marcus? That's not why you really take all these long trips." "Stop. All those client meetings that run late, all those overnight stays in random motels. Janet thinks you're so dedicated." I said, "Stop. But we both know what room 237 at the Moonlight Motel in Burlington is really for, don't we?" I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop in the middle of the highway. No other cars, no lights except our headlights cutting through darkness. "Get out," I said. My voice was barely a whisper. "Get out of my car." He didn't move. "You can't run from it, Marcus. Can't run from what you did." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Thursday nights. That's when you usually stop there, isn't it?" He pulled something from his jacket pocket. A phone. He turned the screen toward me. "October 15th, last Thursday, you checked in at 9:47 p.m. On the screen was a photo. Security camera footage. Me, walking into room 237. But I wasn't alone. "No," I whispered. "No, you can't." "She was 19, Marcus. Barely older than your daughter will be in a few years. She said she was 22. She showed me ID. Did she? Or did you just choose to believe that?" He put the phone away. "But that's not even your biggest secret, is it?" I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. "Please. I don't know who you are or what you want. What I want." He laughed, soft and low. "I don't want anything, Marcus. I'm just here to help you remember." "Remember what?" "Why you left Chicago so suddenly 5 years ago. Why you changed your name. Why Janet thinks your parents died in a car accident when they're actually living in Bloomington." Each word hit like a physical blow. Things I'd buried, things I'd convinced myself didn't matter anymore. "Your real name is Martin Sawyer," he continued. "And on March 22nd, 2019, you—" "Stop!" I screamed. "I know what I did." Silence. Just the engine idling, the headlights illuminating empty road. "Do you, Martin, do you really know? Or do you just know the story you've been telling yourself?" I couldn't look at him. "She was drunk, Megan Phillips. She ran the red light. The police said it wasn't my fault. But you'd been drinking too. Just 2 beers, just enough to be under the limit. But you knew your reflexes were slower. It wasn't my fault. Her daughter was 4, Emma. Woke up the next morning asking where Mommy was." I was sobbing now. Full body sobs. 5 years of guilt. 5 years of running. I didn't mean, I know. And somehow I believed he did. But meaning and doing are different things, aren't they? I don't know how long I sat there crying. Time seemed to stop on that empty highway. When I finally looked up, he was offering me a tissue. "Thanks," I muttered. "We should probably move," he said. "Don't want someone coming around that curve at 80. I put the car back in drive, started forward. Slower now. 55. Like the weight of truth was pressing down on the accelerator. "How?" I finally asked. "How do you know all this? Does it matter?" "Yes. Are you a cop? Private investigator?" That soft laugh again. "No, Marcus. I'm just someone who sees things. Sees what people carry with them." We drove in silence for a while. The highway stretched endlessly ahead. "What happens now?" I asked. "You going to blackmail me? What do you think should happen?" "I don't know. I've been asking myself that for 5 years." I glanced at him. Some nights I think about turning myself in, but then I think about Janet, the kids. "So, instead, you go to motels with girls. I'm not proud of it. I didn't say you were." The exit for Burlington was coming up. The exit with the Moonlight Motel. Room 237. "Take the exit," he said suddenly. "What? No, I'm not—" "Take the exit, Marcus." Something in his voice, not threatening, just certain. I took the exit. The Moonlight Motel sat just off the highway, one of those old motor lodges from the 60s. 2 stories. Exterior corridors, the kind of place that rents rooms by the hour. "Park," he said. I pulled into the lot. He pointed to the 2nd floor. Room 237. The door was open. Just a crack. Light coming from inside. "She's waiting for you." My blood went cold. "Who? You know who." And somehow I did. I knew exactly who was behind that door. "No," I whispered. "She's dead. She's been dead for 5 years. Dead doesn't mean gone, Marcus. You carry her with you every day, every time you look in the mirror, every time you kiss your wife. This isn't real." He turned to look at me, and his eyes, they weren't brown anymore. They were nothing. Just empty sockets full of stars. "Real is relative," he said. "What matters is what you do next." I got out of the car. The October air was sharp, cold. The stairs to the 2nd floor looked impossibly tall, but I was walking, 1 foot in front of the other. I stopped outside room 237, hand raised to knock. "What's in there?" I asked without turning around. "What do you think is in there?" I think Megan Phillips is in there." "Then you should probably hear what she has to say." I pushed the door open. The room wasn't room 237 anymore. It was somewhere else. The walls were glass, or ice. And sitting on what used to be the bed, Megan Phillips looked exactly like she did in the newspaper photos. Young, pretty, blonde hair in a ponytail, wearing the blue scrubs she'd been wearing that night. But her eyes were like his. empty spaces full of impossible things. "Hello, Martin," she said. Her voice was soft, tired. "I've been waiting. I'm sorry." The words tumbled out. "I'm so sorry. I know you are." She stood, moved closer. "I've watched you be sorry for 5 years. Watched you change your name, build a new life, try to outrun what happened. I didn't mean to kill me. No. But you meant to have those beers, meant to get behind the wheel." She was right in front of me now. "Just like you mean to go to this motel, mean to pay those girls, mean to betray your wife. I hate myself for it. I know. But hating yourself doesn't help anyone, doesn't bring me back, doesn't give Emma her mother. What do you want from me?" She tilted her head. "I want to be alive. I want to go home to my daughter. I want to finish my nursing degree, but we don't always get what we want. I could turn myself in. Confess. Could you? And what would that solve? Would it bring me back? Would it help Emma, who's 9 now and happy with her aunt's family? Then what?" She reached out, put her hand on my chest. It was cold, so cold it burned. "You're supposed to choose," she said. "Every day, choose who you want to be, the man who killed me, or the man who learned from it. It's not that simple, isn't it? You think you're complicated, special, but you're just a man who makes choices, bad ones mostly." The room was changing, the walls cracking, revealing the dingy motel room underneath, and Megan was fading. "Wait," I said. "Tell me how to forgive myself." She smiled, sad and beautiful. "I can't, only you can. But first you have to stop. Stop running, stop hiding, stop hurting others because you're hurting." She was almost gone now, translucent. "Emma," I said desperately. "Is she okay?" The last thing I saw was her smile becoming warm, real. "She's perfect," she whispered. "She's going to be a doctor, like her mom wanted to be. And Martin, she doesn't need your guilt. Let it go. Choose better." And then she was gone. I was alone in the room 237, just a dirty motel room. When I walked back down to the parking lot, he was waiting, leaning against my car. "Feel better?" he asked. Different can be good." He crushed out a cigarette. "Ready to continue?" I looked back at the motel, at all the Thursday nights I'd spent there. "Yeah, I'm ready." We got back in the car, back onto the highway, east, toward home, toward Janet, toward my kids, toward a life I'd been running from. "So what are you?" I asked. "Angel? Demon?" That soft laugh. "Does it matter? I'm just someone who rides, someone who sees, someone who helps people see too. And you just stand on the side of the road. Everyone has secrets, Marcus, but not everyone is ready to face them. You were ready. That's why you stopped." We drove in comfortable silence. The highway opened up ahead, less like a tunnel now, more like a road. "Will I see you again?" I asked. "Do you want to?" "No, no offense. Good answer." He pointed ahead. "My stop's coming up." I looked. There was nothing there, no exit, just highway and darkness. There's nothing there. There's always something there. You just have to know how to look. I pulled over. He grabbed his backpack, got out, started walking back into the darkness. I watched him disappear, like he'd never been there at all. The rest of the drive was normal. The radio came back on somewhere around Oakley. I stopped for gas in Hayes. The kid behind the counter couldn't have been more than 19, same age as the girls. The realization made me sick. "You okay, mister?" he asked. "Yeah, just tired." I bought coffee, left a 20 for a $10 purchase. Small gesture, but it felt like a start. The sun was coming up when I reached Kansas City. I'd driven this route dozens of times and never noticed the sunrise, too wrapped up in my own darkness. I called Janet from a McDonald's parking lot in Topeka. "Hey, babe," she answered. "How'd the meeting go?" "Actually, it didn't. I need to tell you something when I get home." Silence, then, "Marcus, you're scaring me." "My name's not Marcus, it's Martin Sawyer. And 5 years ago, I killed someone, accidentally, and I've been running ever since." I could hear her breathing, processing. "Come home," she said finally. "Just come home. We'll figure it out." "You don't hate me?" "I don't know what I feel. But you're my husband, the father of my children, and you're calling me at 6 a.m. to tell me the truth. So come home." The drive home took 3 more hours. 3 hours to think about what I'd say, how I'd explain. Janet was at the kitchen table when I walked in, coffee cup between her hands. The kids were at school. "Hi," I said. "Hi." I sat down, and I told her everything. Chicago, the accident, Megan Phillips, the name change, the motel, the girls, all of it. She listened, didn't interrupt. When I finished, we sat in silence. 15 years, she said finally. 15 years of marriage, and none of it was real? The love was real, is real. The family we built on lies. Yes, but still built, still ours. She looked at me, really looked, seeing not Marcus the sales manager, but Martin, the real me, the girl you killed. Tell me about her. So I did. Young mother, nursing student, working nights to pay for school. A whole life gone. And her daughter? Emma, she's 9 now, lives with her sister, happy. That's good. She took a breath. Do you understand what you've done? Not just to them, but to us. Yes, I need time to think, to decide. Of course. I'll stay at a hotel. No more hotels, no more running. Guest room. We'll tell the kids you're sick, and we'll figure this out. Why not just throw me out? She was quiet, then, because I loved you. Love you? Because for 15 years you were a good husband, a good father, because people are complicated, and maybe you're not the only one with secrets. I looked at her, saw something I'd missed. She was carrying something too. Janet, later. Now you need to shower. Then figure out what you're going to do about Chicago, about the police, because I won't be married to a fugitive. So decide, keep running or stop. I'll stop, I'll call a lawyer, turn myself in. She nodded. Good. I went upstairs, sat on the guest room bed, called the Moonlight Motel first. Canceled my standing reservation. You sure, Mr. Smith? The manager asked. Yeah, I'm done. Then I called a lawyer. Patricia Hendricks. She specialized in cases like mine. Given the circumstances, she said, we might work something out. Probation, community service, restitution. Whatever it takes. After I hung up, Janet knocked. I called my sister, told her everything. She says I'm crazy for not throwing you out. Maybe you are. The thing is, I keep thinking about that hitchhiker you mentioned. Was he real? I thought about those eyes full of stars. About Megan in room 237. I don't know. Does it matter? She came in, sat on the bed, not close, but not across the room. Real or not, something happened. You're different, like you finally woke up. Maybe I did. The kids will be home soon. We need to figure out what to tell them. The truth, age appropriate, but the truth. She nodded. It'll be hard. Sarah especially. She idolizes you. Maybe it's good for her to know her dad isn't perfect, that people make mistakes but can try to fix them. She stood, walked to the door, stopped. Martin? That secret I mentioned 3 years ago, when you were in Dallas, I had an affair with David from book club, just twice. I ended it, but I did it. Because I was lonely, because you were always gone. The words hit, but also relief, like the playing field had leveled. I'm sorry I made you feel that way. I'm sorry, too, for all of it. We looked at each other, two broken people, two liars, two humans who'd made bad choices. So, what now? I asked. Now we pick up our kids, make dinner, help with homework, and tomorrow we start figuring out if we can build something new, something honest. I'd like that. Me too. But Martin, no more secrets, ever. You feel yourself starting to drift, you tell me. Deal? Deal? She left. I looked out the window. Somewhere out there, the hitchhiker was waiting. Thumb out, eyes full of impossible things, waiting for the next person ready to face their truth. I hoped they'd stop. I hoped they'd choose better. Because that's all any of us can do. Choose. Every day. Choose truth over lies. Choose facing over running, even if home is different now. Even if it needs rebuilding, it's still home, and that hitchhiker, the one who knows your darkest secret, he's not out there on some highway. He's in your passenger seat right now. Has been all along. Waiting. The only question is, are you ready to stop? The choice is yours. So I ask you, what's the one thing you've never told anyone? That secret you keep locked away? Because somewhere out there, he's waiting, and he already knows. The question is, when will you stop running from it? Think about that tonight, when you're lying in bed, when you can hear your own heartbeat in the silence. And if you found yourself gripping the wheel a little tighter during this story, if you found yourself thinking about your own secrets, maybe it's time to share this story. Hit that share button. Leave a comment about what choices you're ready to make. Subscribe if you want more stories about the things that wait in the darkness. Because the scariest stories aren't about monsters, they're about us, about what we carry, about what happens when we finally stop. Sweet dreams, if you can manage them. Now, sleep. Or at least try to. It's quiet now, too quiet, but not empty. That feeling crawling up your spine, that weight pressing on your chest, that's not your imagination. You're not alone. There's something behind the curtain. You haven't looked, not because you forgot, but because you're afraid to know. You heard the whisper, software wet, wrong. Like breath dragged across broken glass. But you told yourself it was the wind, didn't you? That lie made you feel safe. Temporarily. Let me ask you, does the wind whisper your name? Does the wind tap lightly, again and again, from the same spot, behind the curtain, every night? Does the wind leave scratches on your window that weren't there this morning? Thin, sharp, like claws, like warnings. You don't remember opening the window. You never open the window. But it's unlocked now. You could check. You could stand up, you could walk over, and pull the curtain back, but you won't, because you know what's waiting, not because you've seen it, but because you felt it, in the quiet, in the dark, every time you close your eyes, every time you wake up and your blanket is just slightly moved, your door slightly cracked. You try to explain it, your mind wants to explain it, but that whisper, that sound that only comes when you're alone, when everything is still, when the night is at its deepest, that's not a dream, that's a presence. It doesn't want your fear, it wants your attention. It feeds on the moment you doubt yourself. The second you wonder if you heard something, the instant your heart rate rises. That's when it leans closer. It's been patient, watching, learning you like prey. You ever notice it never shows up when the lights are on, when someone's in the room? Number It waits for the ritual, the brushing of your teeth, the turning off of lights, the last look at your phone, the deep breath just before sleep. That's when it wakes up. That's when it stirs behind the curtain. Sometimes it watches you all night. Sometimes it moves. A shift in the shadow. A faint creak on the floorboards. The sound of fabric sliding over skin. And when you don't check, when you ignore it, that's when it comes closer. Not fast, not loud, just closer. You might feel a cold spot on the bed. You might feel breath on your neck. You might hear a whisper in your ear that sounds almost like your voice. It copies, it mimics, it blends, not to confuse you, to prepare you, because soon it won't need the curtain, it won't need shadows, it will sit beside you, stand behind you, speak through you. You won't even know when it happens. You'll wake up, look in the mirror, and something will be off. Your eyes won't blink quite right, your smile will linger too long. Your reflection will move just a little after you do. And the people around you? They'll say you seem different. Not worse, just not you. But tonight you're still you. Still in control, for now. You could still check. You could still confront it. Pull the curtain back, face it, but deep down, you've already made your choice. You won't. Because you'd rather lie still. Let your eyes drift shut, and hope sleep comes quickly. And it will. But what you wake up as might not be the same. Now, if you've made it this far, congratulations. You're not just a viewer, you're part of something bigger. Something that watches with you, that sits beside you as you watch, as you listen, as you wait. Because this story doesn't end when the screen fades to black. It follows you into the next room, into your dreams, into your reflection. If you liked this story, like, share, and subscribe, so you don't miss the next one, so we don't miss you, and comment below. Tell us the moment you stopped feeling alone. We're watching, we're listening, and we read everything. Now, go ahead, gain the courage to check the dark corners before you sleep. Turn off the lights, close your eyes, sleep well, if you can.